Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra. As always, we are very thankful you take the time from your busy day to view our program. My friends, as you know, some of you may know that I am involved in a lawsuit with 4 armed intruders that were on my property, and I'm the one that wound up getting charged with felony charges. But anyway, the reason why I bring this up is some folks had made contact with me and about a GoFundMe thing that I did, and I'm not promoting that here. I'm bringing this the reason why we're going to change this format a little bit on this program. And one of the things I talked about, particularly to the Patriot community, because a lot of people understand that we represent a commercial entity, and this is why everything is always an upper case when you get a letter from the government or an insurance company or whatever. They are contracting with a commercial entity. So when you go into a court system, of course the court is controlled by a foreign guild called the Bar Association, British Accreditation Registry, and that's why the attorneys to atone, to separate one from one's property, have a British title of nobility called an esquire. This is the reason why they are called esquires. They are part of the British Accreditation Registry. That's right. Our courts are controlled by a foreign guild. Okay. So when I made the comment that can you see the way the media is in this country, can you see the headlines now that Tom D'Ambra says he's not Tom D'Ambra? Well, evidently I lost quite a few people by making that comment. So what I've decided to do is go back a little bit, because we have a lot of new viewers on this program, not just locally throughout the states of Vermont and New Hampshire, but also through the internet. And it's obvious to me from 2 of the comments that were made to me that we need to go back into the base of what the reason why we began this program was, to educate the American people about our current state of affairs. Like I used to say, that we would connect the dots of history with today's events. So what we sort of got away from, my friends, was the understanding that, okay, I covered this material over the years, and then we went on to just current events today. Because as we can all see, there's major things happening on a daily basis here in our nation and throughout the world. So after some comments that were made to me, I have decided that, yes, we are going to take a portion of our time with you and cover current events today, but I also want to get back to the base and the main motivation of why we do this program, which was to educate the American people about our standings and our relationship with the international bankers, the government's relationship with the international bankers, and the lack of money system, as I like to say. So I just want to say that some of you that have been watching this program for a lot of years, I'm going to be reviewing some things, is my point. Okay, but I am going to I want to dedicate a certain amount of time to current events. Okay, so with that being said, let's get into some current events that took place this past week. All right, longtime ally, friend, confidant, aide-de-camp of President Trump, a gentleman by the name of Roger Stone, was arrested at early morning at his house by 29 armed, jackbooted thugs of the FBI. Now, he has offered to go, and this all has to do with Russian collusion. Of course, there was no Russian collusion, so the crimes that he had been charged with are all what's called process crimes. Sort of goes back to J. Edgar Hoover's statement that we will make the American justice system so that we could prosecute a ham sandwich. This is where we're at, folks. So anyway, he was arrested, and unbelievably so, a CNN van pulled up in front of his house prior to the FBI even getting there. Now, the reporter says that, oh, he had a hunch. Well, what we have found out, what Mr. Stone's attorneys have found out, and his neighbor has made, who was walking the dog, made a sworn statement that he witnessed this with the times. So they've got the times of the FBI arriving, they've got the times of the neighbor seeing and testifying that the CNN van showed up. They got the times of the attorneys being notified of the pending arrest and so forth. And against all jurisprudence, what we're supposed to have in this country, the CNN was the first people notified by the FBI of the pending arrest of Roger Stone so they could be there to cover it. Now, the media, as we all know, has been weaponized against the American people, but think about this, my friends. You see how the whole system is weaponized against us? The FBI is nothing but jackbooted thugs. That's what they are. And by the way, my friends, the federal government is not supposed to be involved in law enforcement at all. But it is. And it's controlled by the international bankers. So you have a guy being arrested on a process crimes, and at gunpoint, 29 agents. CNN knows about it before his attorneys, before he knows about it. And they have his neighbor who was walking his dog early in the morning to testify with this whole thing. That is a weaponization of the media. Let us continue. This is from the BBC. Pope admits clerical abuse of nuns, including sex slavery and forced abortions. Now, my friends, this has been going on for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. The Pope admits clerical abuse of nuns, including sex slavery and forced abortions. Never mind that the Catholic Church has been transferring pedophilia crimes throughout the diocese of their churches without notifying the people that they were transferring these pedophilia priests to. Never mind notifying through state law that's supposed to go on these sexual crimes list and all that. They just ignored all that. Never mind that the second in charge of the Vatican is up on charges of child sex slave trading of 149 children that we know of, and they got pictures of him with little boys snorting cocaine. This is the second in charge of the Vatican. You think you're going to find God in that organization? Let us continue. Okay, New York Governor Cuomo was very upset. He has to raise taxes in New York. Why, folks? Because the New York State exodus has cost the state $2.3 billion in reduced tax collection. So many people are leaving New York State, my friends, that the collection of taxes has been reduced by $2.3 billion. Now, a frugal person representing the people would say, well, okay, we're going to cut back on our budget that $2.3 billion. Nope, no, that's not how it works in government. We're going to find a way to take more from you, the people that are foolish enough to stay in New York. Oh, by the way, speaking of New York, and we reported this to you some months ago, but now it's actually in the New York mainstream media, that the Sharia law has taken effect in communities in New York City. There is an organization called the MCP, and the MCP stands for Muslim Community Patrol. They operate outside the law of New York. They operate outside the venue of the NYPD. They operate within the venue of Sharia law, and they actually have their own equipment and their own police patrol vehicles, etc. It's called the MCP, Muslim Community Patrol. How do you like that, my friends? Isn't that really something? And also, I want to read a quote from you from a hierarchy in the ICE system. Okay, listen to this. The Chinese and Muslims are pouring across the borders. They are getting cooperation from civilian authorities. That's their government. I don't say it's our government, folks. We've lost our government. The government is controlled by the international bankers. The United States, USA Inc., United States Incorporated, is an insolvent corporation, and it is being controlled by its creditors. It's very simple. Let's continue. The Chinese and Muslims are pouring across the borders. They are getting cooperation from civilian authorities. There are stand-down orders from various PDs to ignore certain indicators. There are predetermined weapon caches awaiting these new immigrants. Drugs are the new currency. We know of at least a dozen safe houses, but are being prevented from moving in. We are soon going to be fighting these bastards in the streets. But they want to take your guns. They're allowing this armed invasion force into our country, but they want to take your guns so you can't protect yourself. The reason why they want your guns, my friends, is because so you can't protect yourself from who we're supposed to have the guns for originally. What was that? A tyrannical government. This is why they want your guns. Okay. And speaking of, I want to get into a little bit the State of the Union address. Obviously, I thought President Trump did a wonderful job. I was very pleased about that. And did you happen to see Pelosi in the background like she's pretending like she's reading papers? You arrogant, narcissist person. How arrogant and narcissist can you be? Oh, by the way, I don't know if anyone noticed, but I didn't see Ginsburg there, did you? But anyway, did you see everyone gets to bring a guest when they go, okay? Did you see who Pelosi's guest was? That was Leana Wen. Now, you may not know who Leana Wen is. You should know who Leana Wen is because her organization gets over $500 million a year from your sweat equity. Leana Wen, my friends, is the president of Planned Parenthood. That's who Pelosi's guest was for the State of the Union address. Okay, now, Representative Ilhan Omar, she represents District 608 in Michigan. And I know I reported this some time to you, but now it's made the mainstream media. So now you can believe me because the mainstream media is saying it, so you can believe it now. But anyway, as I reported to you some months ago, Representative Ilhan Omar, and she was the one that had like the blue wrap around her head with all the women that were wearing the white at the time. Anyway, you know who she married? She married her brother. This is allowed with Sharia law. She married her brother, not her stepbrother, not her brother from another mother, nothing like that. She married her blood brother, and it is accepted in this country. How crazy are we getting? Now, speaking of crazy, you know this delegate or Representative Tran from Virginia that co-authored the bill to allow babies to be murdered post-birth. You know, as the governor said, oh, we put the baby on the table, we make the baby comfortable, and then we decide whether we're going to murder the baby or not. This is your tax dollars at work, folks. Anyway, did you see her latest bill she put up that she co-authored? You didn't see that. I'm surprised. You must get your information from the mainstream media. She put up a bill, and I don't make any of this stuff up, folks, as crazy as it sounds. She wants to murder babies, delivered babies. She wants to murder babies, my friends. But she put in a bill to protect gypsy moths and cankerworms. She wants to murder babies, but she put in a bill to protect gypsy moths and cankerworms. I think enough said on that. Okay, talk about legislation. You may have noticed that a lot of the, I don't get into the left and right stuff, guys. I think in terms of up and down, not left and right. But there was a bill, HR at the federal level, HR 5181, and what that did was it took $2 billion and supplemented things like MSNBC, BuzzFeed, and all these left side of the divide paradigm media entities. Well, 2 weeks ago, that funding ended. It went from 2015 to 2017. It was taken out of the defense budget. And that bill, when that funding ended, the very next week, hundreds of employees from various left side of the divide paradigm, and media entities had major league layoffs. Isn't that something? So not only you're paying for the weaponization of the federal government against the people, but you're also paying for the weaponization and the propaganda of, you guessed it, the media. Isn't that incredible? Okay, folks, that's just a real brief. Here we are with some headlines that all took place this week. Now, let's get into some quotes, and we will go from there. Okay, Joseph Goebbels. Joseph Goebbels was the propaganda minister of the Third Reich. Propaganda works best when those who are being manipulated are confident that they are acting on their own free will. Adolf Hitler for Mein Kampf, My Struggle. The best way to take control over a people and control them utterly is to take a little of their freedom at a time, to erode rights by 1,000 tiny and almost imperceptible reductions. In this way, the people will not see those rights and freedoms being removed until past the point at which these changes cannot be reversed. That's where we're at. Make the lie big, make it simple, keep saying it, and eventually they will believe it. Who's they? Again, this is Adolf Hitler. Folks, that's you and I. Oh, and by the way, while we're speaking of propaganda, I read page for page the Vermont infanticide bill, and I will tell you the language is stronger than the New York bill. And I don't mean stronger as in protecting babies. What the Vermont bill does, it not only allows them to suck the brains out of a baby that is crowning in the birth canal, it also allows the baby to be basically, like the governor of Virginia said, put on the table, make it comfortable, and we'll decide whether we're going to murder the baby or not. But it also does this. It takes away all the protections of a baby who may have survived an abortion attempt. In other words, even in the New York bill, if a baby survives an abortion attempt, the physician must provide remedy or care to that baby. Not in the Vermont bill. And they have 91 co-signers. 91 co-signers. Okay. Let's talk about the media again. The business of the journalist is to destroy the truth, to lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of Mammon, and to sell his country and his race for his daily bread. We are the tools and vassals of rich men behind the scenes. We are the jumping jacks. They pull the strings and we dance. Our talents, our possibilities, and our lives are all the property of other men. We, talking about the media, are intellectual prostitutes. Totally agree. This is Napoleon Bonaparte. This is one of my favorite quotes from him, although I've said my other favorite quote many times, but I'll just tell you right now because it's absolutely true, particularly in today's events, is that history is agreed upon lies by the victors. But this quote has to do with the bankers. When the government is dependent upon bankers for money, they and not the leaders of the government control the situation, since the hand that gives is above the hand that takes. Money has no motherland. Financiers are without patriotism and without decency. Their sole object is gain. Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay, so I'm going to, again, we're going to back up, folks. And next week I'm going to get into some things. But again, what was I talking about when I said, can you see the headlines now? Tom D'Ambra says he's not Tom D'Ambra. I was talking about this commercial, in law it's called the nom de guerre, which is French for name of war. Just like another good French word in financing is mortgage, death pledge. You go to the morgue, you die, right? Mortgage, death pledge. Okay, but anyway, this book I'm showing you, and I'm not saying go out and buy it. I'm not promoting books, although you should read it. But anyway, this was written by Carol Quigley, who was a professor And he was allowed to go into all these meetings by the global elite, the bankers, and he was so enthusiastic about what he was seeing that they wanted him to write it and keep a log, historical data of their meetings and everything, but they did not want him to write a book about it and go public, because after all, they, as Rockefeller said, John David, that they would have never been able to accomplish all they've accomplished being exposed in the light of day. So what he did, though, he was so enthralled with this and so excited about what they were pulling off, and he believed in it so much that he did write it in a book. And listen to what his quote is about what the objective of these secret meetings was. The powers of financial capitalism, that's the bankers, had a far-reaching plan, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. They've done it. The financial control, my friends, of our nation and many nations throughout the world is in private hands. The Federal Reserve, as we've said to you over the years, is a private for-profit banking corporation. Now, who is this guy's mentor? President Bill Clinton. I heard that call clarified by a professor I had named Carroll Quigley. And this is the book that he wrote. And I highly recommend it, my friends. It's called Tragedy and Hope, A History of Our World and Our Time. And boy, if you want to see how deep it goes, there's a good one for you right there. But let me read that quote just one more time. The powers of financial capitalism, the bankers, had a far-reaching plan, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. It goes back to what Amschel Rothschild said, folks. Give me control of a nation's currency. I care not who makes its laws. Well, how is it that Planned Parenthood gets over $500 million a year, but yet they're allowed to make donations to politicians in power? Isn't that called a conflict of interest? Think about that. And of course, if you're getting $500 million and you're making millions of dollars selling the blood of babies and the tissue of babies, I'm reading things, as high as $8,000 for the blood from a baby. I'm reading things as high as hundreds of thousands of dollars for live babies, because the tissue doesn't deteriorate if the baby's kept live longer. And this is why they're doing, folks, besides all the spirit cooking, as John Podesta bragged about in his emails, spirit cooking. See, folks, this is what they're after. They've got the money. They've got control. They're after your soul. They're after our souls. Their energy is in all types of forms. And energy never dissipates. It's merely transferred. And what do I mean by that? Okay, you have water. Okay, it's in a liquid state. You take that water and you boil it and it evaporates into a different state, the steam. You see, it's energy all energy is merely transferred into different forms. This is what they're after. Now, let's get back into this book that we went through many years ago, and it's called A Study of the Federal Reserve and Its Secrets. It's written by Eustace Mullins, and Eustace Mullins was an author who was under hire by a poet named Ezra Pound to do some research on the Federal Reserve. And he came out with this book. And by the way, there's another book I highly recommend if you want to understand the Federal Reserve, A Study of the Federal Reserve and Its Secrets, Eustace Mullins. And the other one is The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffith. Highly recommend them books, folks. If you really want to have an understanding of how the Federal Reserve was put into play, what their goals are, what their manipulating factors are, who they're paying off, what they paid off, how they manipulated it, all of it. You study them two books and you will have a rude awakening. And if you want to understand why we bond our children with the birth certificate, why we do not own any property at all, Senate Document 43, all property is in subordinate necessity of the state, why we've been declared the enemy of the state, Trading with the Enemies Act of 1933. If you want to understand the Lieber codes from Francis Lieber, 1871, if you want to understand how what the Civil War was really about, taking the black people off the private plantation, putting everybody on the federal plantation. If you really want to understand these things, my friends, you've got to do some studying. Because you're not going to learn about this in the public school system, you're not going to learn about this in the mainstream media, and you're certainly not going to learn about this from the 501c3 IRS corporate tax-free corporations, the pulpit churches. You're not going to learn it. It's up to you to educate yourself, because you're not going to learn it from the control mechanisms of these very same bankers that bond your children and send your children off to war so they can bleed and they get the booty. And booty is a legal term. It means profit by conquest. Just like in Afghanistan. We've been there 17, 18 years, right? And what's going on? They're all upset because we're going to leave Afghanistan. Really? You're all upset. Now, China is getting 98% of the rare earth minerals in Afghanistan, and our children are over there bleeding to protect these Chinese corporations. Why? Because the Chinese control a large portion of our debt, and they have all these politicians in their coffers. That's why. Why is it that the Just Us system, look at Clapper, Kobney, Mueller, I mean, all of them have lied to Congress. Uranium One. I could sit here for weeks and just do program after program after program about all the corruption, all the lies, all the evidence, and no one's being prosecuted. Zero. Why? Because they're all controlled by these bankers. Okay. A study of the Federal Reserve and its secrets. Now, before we get into that, let's read some quotes from some very important people. Charles Lindbergh. This is Charles Lindbergh Sr. He was a senator from Wisconsin. He tried to warn the American people. Under the Federal Reserve Act, panics are scientifically created. The present panic is the first scientifically created one worked out as we figured a mathematical equation. He's talking right there about the Great Depression. Of course, they had other depressions, didn't they? That they called them panics. Then you had the agricultural depression of the 20s, 1920 to 21. And we've told you why they did that, and we're going to get into that again. This is Ron Paul. I've had the pleasure of meeting this gentleman on 4 occasions, and I will tell you, nobody in my lifetime has made a more stringent effort to educate the American people about not just the corruption in government, but who controls the government. Nothing good can come from the Federal Reserve. It is the biggest taxer of them all. Diluting the value of the dollar by increasing its supply is a vicious, sinister tax on the poor and the middle class. What is he talking about? He's talking about an equation that you come to know as inflation. You see, the more of anything there is, the less value it has. You get it? So this is one reason why in 1913, on December 21st, 1913, when the Congress was away, the Federal Reserve Act was put in secretly. And what they did, my friends, is they started printing more, printing more, printing more. You had the Roaring 20s. Everybody's doing good. We got plenty of money. Boom. They pulled back the money supply, the M1, the M3, and then they brought in the call options. Well, there wasn't enough physical money in circulation. This is before the world of digital world. I think now, what is it? 94% of our money is in cyberspace somewhere? Because we don't have money, folks. We merely have ledger entries. That's all we have. There's no gold, there's no silver backing our medium of exchange. Let us continue. This is Woodrow Wilson, one of the biggest criminals ever to hold the office of presidency. I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Well, my friends, we're going to continue that quote here in a little bit. Okay, this is Ronald Reagan. The Federal Reserve is answerable to no one. Now, I remember this quote, and I'm going to tell you the reason why I do. I happened to be in the Marine Corps when Ronald Reagan, I was at the very end of my tour, when Ronald Reagan became a president. And of course, at that point, the prime lending rate in our country was at 21%. 21%. That was the prime lending rate. So what does that mean to Mr. and Mrs. America? It means if you went for a mortgage, death pledge, or an auto loan, you were going to be paying 24, 28, 30% interest. So a reporter asked Mr. Reagan at his first press conference and said, Mr. President, what are you going to do about the prime lending rate? And Ronald Reagan looked right at the reporter and said, there is nothing I can do. I've merely been elected President of the United States. The Federal Reserve answers to no one. That was 1980, folks. We're in 2019. Nothing's changed. Let us continue. Now, this is the gentleman I was just talking about, Eustace Mullins. The Federal Reserve System is not federal. It has no reserves. And it is not a system at all, but rather a criminal syndicate. Totally agree. And this man should know, because he spent almost 2 years, almost every day, at the Library of Congress studying this group and its history. Let us continue. This is from Thomas Jefferson in 1802. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around the banks and corporations that will grow up around the banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. Well, folks, has that happened? Do we own anything? Absolutely anything? No, we don't. Senate Document 43. From the Exchange Stabilization Fund, the bankruptcy of the USA Incorporated, March 9th, 1933. Senate Document 43, all property is in the state and subordinate to the necessities of the state. Folks, when they say all property, they don't just mean land. They mean all property, as in human resources. And this is where the nom de guerre, the commercial entity, comes into play. Because when the USA Inc. went insolvent and they took all the gold and silver, they liened the public trust. It still didn't pay off the facade debt. So what did Roosevelt and the bankers agree on? Your sweat equity. And they changed the law system. Because everyone knows we used to have common law in this country. But now we have admiralty law, law mercantile. How'd that happen? Because they had to deal with bonded entities. You see, my friends, we as a people are nothing more than chattel. Chattel. Movable property which has been liened. And if you're in a commercial venue of law, and we are, which our court system, that's how it became controlled by the international bankers through the British Accreditation Registry. You know it as the Bar Association. And this is why attorn, to separate one from one's property, ease, are holding a British title of nobility called Esquire. Very simple. Very elaborate, yet very simple. Okay, now I'm going to try to read this quote to you. This is from Wilson again. This is the full quote. I am a most unhappy man. I'm sorry, folks. This is really tough to read from my vantage point. I'm hoping you're able to get this. I'm going to have to print that out for you. I apologize to you. I'm just not able to. I'm going to spend too much time trying to do that. Okay, Louis T. McFadden was the chairman of the Banking and Currency Committee, and he tried to warn the American people on numerous occasions. He was finally murdered. Louis T. McFadden was poisoned to death. Now, this is not hearsay. This is autopsy. Unlike Judge Scalia and some other people who don't have autopsies, this was an autopsy done and he was poisoned to death. Now, listen to Louis T. McFadden's warning to the American people. We have in this country one of the most corrupt institutions the world has ever known. I refer to the Federal Reserve Board. This evil institution has impoverished the people of the United States and has practically bankrupted our government. It has done this through the corrupt practices of the moneyed vultures who control it. Let us continue. Milton Friedman. The Federal Reserve definitely caused the Great Depression by contracting the amount of money in circulation by 1/3 from 1929 to 1933. What did I just tell you? I just said this to you. They expanded credit, got everybody in debt. They pulled the M1 and the M3, made the call option. There wasn't enough physical money in circulation to cover the debt. And what happened? There was a transfer of equity. You see, folks, because back then, a bank, if it was going to loan $1, it had to have $1 on hand. But today we are under a system, thanks to these money vultures, called fractional reserve. And what does fractional reserve mean? Well, fractional, right? Small piece of, a portion of, a fraction. Reserve, what you have in reserve, in stored. Fractional reserve, small, a portion of, on hand. So it was 100%. Every dollar loaned, you had to have $1 in hand, and so forth. Well, you know where that fractional reserve is right now? 2 cents. For every 2 cents that your bank or lending institution has on hand, they can loan out $1, a Federal Reserve note. 2%. 2%, my friends. So you say, well, wait a minute, D'Ambra. How the hell are they lending money? They're not lending money. They are creating credit, and here's how they do it. You go into your bank and say, hey, I need a death pledge. I need a mortgage. And the bank says, okay, well, they're going to check your credit. They're going to do your loan to value ratios, your debt to income ratios, all these things. And then they're going to say yay or nay. Or let's say you want to buy an automobile or a truck. You're going to put that land and or that truck up as collateral. Because, okay, so they put the land up or the truck up for collateral. Well, how are they lending me the money? They're not lending you money. They're creating credit. Remember the document we did 2 shows on? Money mechanics? We're going to have to do that again. So anyway, what they do is this. They only need 2 cents of every dollar they're going to lend you. But we are on a promissory note system, right? Federal Reserve note. What's a note? An acknowledgement of debt. That's why there's 2 signatories. One's the creditor, one's the debtor. So you go to this lending institution and you say this, well, okay, they're going to take the land or they're going to take the vehicle up as collateral, but they still only have to have 2 cents for every dollar they're going to lend you. But we are on a promissory note system, so what they do, my friends, is they take your promise to pay monthly, the term and the interest rate, they take that promise to pay, they put it on their ledger as an asset because we're on a promissory note system, and then they cut you a check with the note that you promised to pay with. You're creating the asset that they're lending to you. And then there is no risk to the bank. There's no risk to the bank, my friends. They put out 2 cents of every dollar they lend out because you created the asset. You get it? This is where we're at. Let us continue. Okay, this was a part of his speech. I'm just going to read the part because we just did the top part. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. My friends, this is in 1802. Do you know what the War of 1812 was about? The War of 1812 was about the Rothschild banking dynasty trying to do a Federal Reserve type central bank system in our country even back then. What was it Benjamin Franklin said? The number one reason that the colonists went against Mother England was because the king would not allow the issuance of interest-free script. What do we have today? We have interest-bearing script. You see, we don't have dollars. A dollar is 25.8 grains of gold in the 51 ratio of silver by the Coinage Act, 1789 and so forth, okay? We don't have gold or silver. They took all that in 1933 when USA Incorporated went insolvent to its parent corporation, the creditors Federal Reserve. This is how you're bonded, why you don't own anything. And this is what created that Norm de Geer I was speaking of when I did that short request for help. That seems to have people confused. You know, I have a dear friend of mine who was in the Marine Corps with him. He got out of the Marine Corps, went to college, got a degree in financing. Was the owner of a mortgage company. And when I sat down with him and showed him word for word the acts of the mechanics of our money system, you know, and he's a smart guy, he was 100% clueless. Clueless. He didn't even know where the word mortgage came from. He did not understand the credit system, the lack of money system. He didn't understand the birth certificate. He didn't understand any of the symbology on the Federal Reserve note. He didn't understand any of it. But he's got a degree to hang on the wall in finance. What Jefferson was talking about right here is what a prelude to the War of 1812. And that's the reason why the British burned the West Wing of the White House. Let us continue. Henry Ford, it is well that the American people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Now this I totally agree with. If the American people understood what the bankers have done to this nation, and the world for that matter, all the wars, folks, all the wars, all of them, from the Revolutionary War on, have all been either fighting against the bankers or fighting for the bankers. It might have been propagandized, but all of it has been due to the actions of and the desires of the bankers. There's not one. Not the Civil War. Look at the Civil War. Let's talk about that real quick. The North was financed by M. Rothschild out of London, the city of London, not London town, the city of London, where the Queen has to get permission to go, has to make an appointment to go. And the South was financed by James Rothschild out of Paris, France. You get it? So what happened? They didn't expect the South to do so well militarily. So when they started to do so well, they pulled the credit of the South. The South collapsed. What was it Lincoln said? I have the in front, no, how'd it go? Excuse me, I'm sorry. In my front yard, I have the Confederate Army. In my backyard, I have the international bankers. For the future of the Union, it is the bankers I fear the most. It's the bankers who killed Lincoln. It's the bankers who killed Lincoln. Because he issued a thing called greenbacks. Because they wanted to charge him 24% interest to finance more of the war. Lincoln said no. So he issued a thing called greenbacks. It was non-interest bearing script based on the faith and credit, ain't much faith and credit in the United States government now, is there, of the United States government. So what they did was they said, well, we can't have this. We're going to lose control. Bye-bye, Mr. Lincoln. James Garfield, McKinley, they both spoke of it. What happened to them? Bye-bye to both of them. Then you had a great leader called John F. Kennedy who really tried to make a difference. And we covered his speech some months ago when he went to the National Press Club asking the media to help him educate the American people about what was going on. Then we had Executive Order 11110. What happened to JFK? Bye-bye, Mr. Kennedy. Barry Goldwater, another person who tried to warn the American people. Most Americans have no real understanding of the operation of the international moneylenders. The accounts of the Federal Reserve System have never been audited. It operates outside the control of Congress and manipulates the credit of the United States. And folks, this statement, I believe, was made in 1964, no later than 65. And guess what? The books still haven't been audited. And they're still outside the control of Congress. And they have completely destroyed the dollar. Okay, this is Louis T. McFadden, Chairman of the Committee on Banking and Currency, Congressional Record 12595-12603, 10th of June, 1932. Mr. Chairman, we have in this country one of the most corrupt institutions the world has ever known. I know I just read some of this, but I want to go all the way through. I refer to the Federal Reserve Board and the Federal Reserve Banks. The Federal Reserve Board, a government board, has cheated the government of the United States out of enough money to pay the national debt. The depredations and the iniquities of the Federal Reserve Board and the Federal Reserve Banks acting together have cost this country enough money to pay the national debt several times over. This evil institution has impoverished and ruins the people of the United States, has bankrupted itself, and has practically bankrupted our government. It has done this through the defects of the law under which it operates and through the maladministration of the law by the Federal Reserve Board and through it the corrupt practices of the moneyed vultures who control it. That's 1932. Practically bankrupted the government. What happened on March 9th, 1933? A mere what, 6, 7 months later? The government went bankrupt. Took all the gold and silver, leaned the public trust, bonded its 14th Amendment federal citizens. Let us continue. Louis T. McFadden again, talking about the Federal Reserve. It has carefully contrived occurrence. International bankers sought to bring about a condition of despair so that they might emerge the rulers of us all. Are they the rulers of us all? Well, let me see. They could. How about instead of me going through the whole list of what they do control, how about if you, in just in your mind, think of maybe one thing they don't control? Because I'm running out of time. It would be shorter just to say what they do not control. Drawing a blank? You should be. Because they control it all, my friends. The only thing they don't control is people of faith. That's it. Everything else, they control. Okay, this is Mr. Leo Tolstoy. By the way, this gentleman was murdered in Mexico by the bankers. The essence of all slavery consists in taking the product of another's labor by force. It is immaterial whether this force be founded upon the ownership of the slave or the ownership of the money that he must get to live. Well, folks, the American people are in a double whammy here because they obviously control us. There's nothing that we do that they don't want us to do. There's nothing that we don't eat. I mean, look, in some states you can't collect the rainwater coming off the roof. Children are being arrested for setting up lemonade stands. Fourth graders in California now are learning how to masturbate. they're learning that there are 15 genders, forced vaccinations. I could go on and go on. They control it all, folks. We are the slaves. They control the slaves, but they also control what? The money or lack of money that we need, the medium of exchange that we need to live. And they pay us, and we pay them, I am very sorry, we pay them for the use of their private script. And you say, well, Tom, there must be something backing it up. Yeah, you know what's backing it up? Your sweat equity, because you're bonded. Your ignorance is the fuel, and your sweat equity is the mechanics. We don't own anything, folks. We are bonded. We are chattel. We might as well be cattle out in the field being driven to the slaughterhouse. And that goes with law enforcement. That goes with the justice system. That goes with every politician you know. Because I can probably name maybe one hand at the federal level politicians who are really trying to make a difference for the American people. And you know, there was some great ones on the Democrat side. Unfortunately, they all died. All of them. The last one that really tried to make a difference, they had to take him out, was Larry McDonald, Representative of Congress, Colorado. The only one up there right now who's really talking about this, my friends, is Rand Paul. He's a Republican from Kentucky. He's about the only one. So Mr. Tolstoy is absolutely correct, but we find ourselves as a people in this equation on both examples of it. And I didn't even get to any of the books that I wanted to break this down a little bit for you about Nelson Aldrich, one of the most corrupted, cynical people ever to hold office. Of course, he came from the great state where people are proud of corruption, the state of Rhode Island. You know, I'm from Providence, Rhode Island, folks. There's two things that Rhode Islanders I've always been amazed by. They're proud of their corruption, they accept it, and they prize themselves by the lower number license plates. I don't understand it, but it's unbelievable. I guess if you have a lower number license plate, it's like a prestigious thing. But they're actually proud of their corruption. Of course, Rhode Island is one of the Exeter states, and Rhode Island language of their infanticide bill isn't as bad as Vermont's, but it's right there with New York's. Oh, and by the way, Vermonters, another anti-gun bill is around the corner. You know, someone asked me recently, Tom, how far do you think they'll go? When do you think they'll stop? How much do you think they'll take? Very, very easy to answer. You want to know how far they'll go? You want to know how much they'll take? They will go as far as we allow them to go, and they'll take it all if we don't stop them. And there is a them, and there is an us, and this is where we're at. And the justice system and the media and the government itself and law enforcement, all of it has been weaponized against the American people. The churches have been weaponized against the American people, everything. Because, folks, anytime the government is giving you something, they're not giving you anything. Remember, we're paying for it. We pay for all of it at an interest due. And there are always strings attached, as we all know. So, my friends, we're going to continue this format next week. And next week I am going to start with this book, The Study of the Federal Reserve and Its Secrets by Eustace Mullins. And we're always very thankful you take the time from your busy day to view our program. We always close in asking you to seek truth, to obtain knowledge, and to manifest kindness to your fellow man. And we always close in reminding you that your government is your responsibility, and we thank you for watching.
Got to read between the lines. Got to read between the lines. Well, the truth is very simple, very hard to find.